space for Montessori leaders to come together, connect, and find support. We know that your job is one that requires many hats, and it's important to have a system of support where you can just connect with other people who share the same role as you do in different communities. Um, Today, we're joined by Kathy Minardi, who many of you seem to already be familiar with, which is great. She's here to share her presentation on leadership. She's got a great organization that she'll talk about, and a course that she's also going to talk about. And I'll let her take it from here because I think that she put together a great presentation for you all. If you have any questions or any comments, you can use the chat or you can unmute yourself. But all of you are muted when you come into the meeting, just because there's quite a few people here, just to just so that it doesn't become too confusing. All right, Kathy, I'll let you go ahead and take it from here.
Thank you so much. It's great to see new faces and old friends. I'm going to just talk for a little bit about Whole School Leadership Institute so that it gives people time to get in. And then I have a presentation to share on leadership. You'll see on the slides, it says Montessori Conference 2020. And because of the pandemic, that was never delivered. So interestingly, I went back and I found a presentation that really gives you some of the highlights of leadership, just a glance at things. And I thought that would be helpful. Whole school leadership began long ago in one way. In the 1980s, I was leading a school and there was nothing offered Montessori leaders at the time in terms of leadership. We were just expected to do what we thought was best, and our dedication was to the child, which it still is. That's our purpose in being in existence. But I was having trouble with the unity of adults in the school. It wasn't working very well. And as a matter of fact, in the mid-'80s, a little boy in our school on a Sunday afternoon was up to bat at Little League. I've told this story to some of you who have been in my course. And the ball he didn't hit the ball. The ball hit him in the heart, and it stopped his heart, and he died. He was 9 years old. His name was Ryan, a beloved child. And the EMS tried to revive him. He could not be revived. And what I noticed next is all the people that came to us to help us deal with this terrible tragedy and crisis, just from everywhere, because baseball spreads the word. Everybody heard about it. And about halfway through the year, I noticed that our school community, our parents, our guides, our assistants, our whole staff was just unified in a way I would never have imagined. And it was almost like you didn't have to tell people what to do. Everything was done. It was just an amazing time. And I asked myself, could we be like this without a tragedy? And that very day that I asked myself that question, I got a brochure in the mail. And the brochure was from the Scott Peck Foundation. You may have heard of The Road Less Traveled, which is about marriage, he wrote. But he wrote later 2 books and did a huge foundation on the science of community building. So this was for executives to go to. And I went to it. I was the only educator. And I was with all these CEOs. And in a week, we learned the science of community building. And I learned all of that science, those elements. And that group of people decided to stay together. So over 16 years, we met 3 times a year. And over that period, those executives had training at Harvard, at MIT, at all the top organizational development programs. which educators didn't know about. And I was invited to go and learn organizational development. So I would go to those trainings and run back home and work with my school. Over 35 years, I honed really an expertise in this whole field of the adults in the school. And so when I retired from my school in Washington, D.C., Aiden Montessori School, I designed a 6-module course so that over a couple of years, our school leaders in Montessori could go through that course and learn so many tools and methods for really dealing with all the things that come up in our schools among our parents and among our staff. So after it was successful, some of you remember me back then, we would meet just before a summer conference or a spring conference, etc. We became a nonprofit. And so that opportunity allowed us to launch a beautiful board and some real strategic plans and move forward with our organization. I'm going to show you on the first slide our first launch as a nonprofit, which brought people all over the world to our course. Our 6-module course starts up every couple of months, so we have new cohorts. And June 15th is module 1 of the next cohort. And so we're going to post that online so you have that information. And then in person, we're going to go back to the Post Oak School in Houston, Texas, and start an in-person course. So that's exciting. That's going to be in November. So all that said, we were ready to start delivering in person our course everywhere, and the pandemic hit. And guess what happened next? We went online. And going online as an organization was a big surprise. The surprise was that people could join us from everywhere in the world. And so our first cohort was that summer of 2020. We had 2 women from Saudi Arabia. We had a man from Kathmandu, Nepal. We had a Norwegian school leader who would get on the internet on his boat in the summer. And all over the US and Asia and South America, it was just an incredible experience. And we were able to hold space for all the suffering we were going through together as school leaders, and learn some of the things that we could apply to really help our school be as healthy as possible. So the whole endeavor is focusing on being a healthy school and a healthy staff culture, so we don't have a toxic culture among our staff and parent community. That's our main focus. And I'm going to explain in the slides a little bit about why that's so important for the children. Okay. Do you think it's good to go now? Are we pretty much filled out? Okay.
Great.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is when we became a nonprofit. We were at the Post Oak School, and you can see from the picture that we have people from everywhere in the world: Australia, Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, Europe, all over the US. It was just an incredible beginning of our Whole School Leadership Institute. And we launched module 1 of the course that continued on. We have public and private Montessori school leaders here, private and public charter Montessori leaders. And so we began. We also, over 1 week's time, we did the AMI administrative certificate. We hosted that. So that gave us a chance to offer a pedagogical study to those people who were running a school and had no pedagogical background. So that's a wonderful program. It's now everywhere, all over the world, that AMI admin course. So there we are. That's me in the middle. Oops. So our work together is in the process of learning about leadership. It's about seeing with new eyes, awakening our hearts, and acting with courage and love. And if you look at our logo, it focuses on courage, vision, and clarity. So that doesn't come easily. That comes with awareness and inner leadership. So this is a new way to look at ourselves as authentic leaders. And being authentic means that we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable and to be really, truly who we are with our fellow community. We don't put on a show of being a boss of the thing. We find a new way. So we're going to, in this presentation, kind of weave threads that help us to focus on what we call whole human systems. We're called whole school because we see our Montessori schools as a living organic system. And that's so important to recognize it that way, moving away from the kind of hierarchical nature that organizations once had into a more organic, whole way of looking. So there's a few points to make about philosophical, scientific, psychosocial, spiritual, and political. In other words, the framework for human potential, which was Montessori's whole purpose, was to create the environment for human potential to flourish. We look at how human systems operate in relationships. That's so important. We look at humans as constantly developing, even after childhood. So we study the planes of adult development. Did you know that they exist? They do. And, you know, a plane is a little different than a stage. A plane has psychological characteristics. We know the planes of the child, and we learn about the planes of the adult. We do some study of the theory of emergence, which informs how change happens. Montessori even spoke to this in saying that if something is going wrong, we don't just try to fix it, we start something anew. And that was the way that she approached the child. We understand when human systems are in well-being. So we learn to define what well-being is. It's a word we use, but do we really know what the characteristics of well-being is? So that's something we study. So our focus today is on ourselves as the adults in the human organic system who've chosen a role to support and aid human life in a Montessori environment. We'll explore the human potential of authentic leadership within each of us. One of the things that we begin with when we first start out with Module 1 is we bring together an understanding of Ubuntu. So the South African Zulu tribes for generations go all the way back in their indigenous time to this expression, Sawubona. It means I see you. And if you were a member of the tribe and would hear this from another person, you would answer by saying Sikona. And that means I am here. So the meaning implicit in this language is part of the spirit of Ubuntu. You can Google Ubuntu, and nowadays you'll find so much written on it. In the beginning of just this coming into the Western world, it was unknown, and now it's really being used a great deal. And it means a person is a person because of other people. The order of exchange is important. Until you see me, I do not exist. So one of the things that we do in our course is we never begin a session until every single person in our Zoom room says how they are and what's going on with them, so that we are differentiating each human being and actually seeing them and hearing them so they exist. And that's something we pass on when we're doing our meetings in our school as well. It just becomes our pattern, the way that we are together. So you can greet one another in the chat if you want. You can say, I see you, I am here. I'm going to give you a minute to just put it in the chat if you'd like. So where are we now? Well, when this presentation was created, we were not in a war, and we are now. Our political reality, we have to look at from this theory of emergence idea of what do we do within ourselves, and what do we do in our school, and what do we do in our community in order to begin to create changes in attitudes, and create change in being able to understand this terrible time we happen to be in. We're going to look at what the Hopi elders say. They did a prophecy a few years ago. And what did Montessori say? We're going to look at. And what do we need to know to create healthy Montessori environments so that children and adults can thrive? Well, let's first talk about authenticity in leadership. We're going to get above and kind of look at the landscape. Montessori focused on what she called the new child. In other words, it wasn't fixing things, it was creating a new focus of prepared environment in order to nurture a child who had the potential of just creating a humanity that was living in peace and love. So this theory of emergence, which comes from science, tells us that the universe is constantly self-organizing. Sometimes what emerges is a destructive force. Our first urge is to try to fix it, but what emerges cannot be easily fixed or eliminated. Instead, the self-organizing principle is to generate more of what is desired so that it emerges as the desired reality. And if we're really looking at this right now in real time, we're seeing a community in Ukraine actually doing this. As hard as all of that is, as horrifying as it is. We focus on ourselves. Ooh, I think I already did that. Whoops. Okay, so here's Montessori speaking on this. The new human being must show us how to make all mankind aware of its unity and the shadows of doubt and fear that hang heavily over the human race. We can now catch a glimpse of the light that will dissipate them, because a new society is already coming into being. A new humanity for a new world is already being born. So that was Montessori, and this is the Hopi elders. The elders came together in Arizona in June 8th, 2000, and they wrote this, and this message is really for us as Montessorians. To my fellow swimmers, Here is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. No, the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water. And I say, see who is there with you, and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for. That is just a priceless message to us as Montessorians. We are the ones we have been waiting for. It's up to us. Okay, going back to authenticity. Brene Brown, if you're in touch with her, does wonderful YouTube and programs and books. And one of her most powerful ones is The Power of Vulnerability. And it's really about being authentic. And Brene Brown really practices it. She's very authentic, even online. You really see that. So that work has to do with our own inner leadership. So it has to do with our own observation. Observation both of becoming an inner awareness of ourselves and an outer noticing. So in leadership, the word noticing gets a lot of attention rather than observation, but we're Montessorians, so observation means a lot to us. And it is this inner and outer noticing that is part of becoming an authentic leader. This is a wonderful quote. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there is little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. So this is that emphasis in leadership on the act of noticing. I remember Katie Myers during a NAMTA whole school management course talking about going into every single classroom environment, and noticing, being there, and touching base with the guide and the assistant. And then the inner noticing that we have to focus on ourselves. So this is the piece about noticing. There's in leadership an emphasis on not only being deep inside and observing what's around you, but also getting up on the balcony and kind of looking down at the patterns. So that's a habit we can develop. And in that habit, we do it in a deliberately developmental observation, deliberately aiding life, our own and others. So not only with our work with the children in our environments, but we're also looking at ourselves and our staff and how it's doing. We're removing the obstacles that prevent people from growing, being joyful, developing, creating, improving their practice and fulfillment. So what does this mean? Individually, we can't grow and develop and transform from one plane to another as adults if supported by we have to be supported by having a deliberately developmental mindset about our school adults. Yes, they have to be accountable. There's freedom and responsibility, but also we create the context where people are allowed to keep on growing. Collectively, we can create intentional, conscious and loving communities where the adults interact in the same ways that we nurture in the children in our midst. So that's the whole purpose of this course. Here's a couple of tips that are great. It's called Activating the Intangibles. We learn in our course to control structure, not people. So in other words, if we're having a meeting, we prepare the environment for that meeting. Where are people going to sit? How are we going to structure reflection? What is the structure that we're going to set up so that we make real progress in our meeting, not controlling the people. We learn to let everyone be responsible for themselves. We avoid taking anything personally. That's a work on ourselves. And we learn to surface unspoken agreements. In other words, those things that people walk away and never talk about, we find the methods to bring those conversations together. Okay, I've been talking about system. So now we're going to dive into what is a system? What is a living organic system? Well, a system is interconnected in such a way that it can produce a pattern of behavior over time. If a particular set of things ceases to interact or interconnect, there's no longer a system. In other words, if the parents pull the children out, we only have the teachers left. We don't have a system. So an ecosystem is a great metaphor for us. And so what are the community characteristics of a system? Well, we started out talking about Ubuntu. In other words, I see you. We have each human being in the school has distinct, differentiated self. And each self is linked to other selves, and those selves become greater than the whole. So in one sense, we have the school. In one sense, we have the classroom. In another sense, we have the staff. Those are all living systems. So if we get up on the balcony and look down on the dance floor, what do we see? Well, if you have a school that goes all the way through adolescence, then you see starting with toddler and going all the way through these multiple systems that are separate and yet whole. So that's a great metaphor for looking at it and for looking at the patterns that are starting to show up from the balcony when you are really noticing. So this process, this is my granddaughter when she was just started in toddler. And her guide would put her hands behind her back and walk around the environment. And guess what my granddaughter did? I love this picture. She is reflecting, going for a walk. This is a great cartoon. It's God up on a cloud looking down at earth. And this is a good one for us as school leaders. God is saying to a few angels, it's not my fault. I turned my back for just a minute and everything started evolving. So that's, really what our reality is. We can't control everything. We have to be present in a way that is helping to guide it. Our teachers are guiding the children. We are guiding this community. We have to look at ourselves in that same way. So I keep going back to science because it's really informing leadership. At the quantum level, all things are interconnected. Have you heard that? At the quantum level, all things are interconnected. It's called unified theory. And it actually means a lot to us in our work in our school. It means that groupings of things influence each other into forms, and these forms create patterns over time. And so the implications of understanding that everyone in the school at some level is connected can lead to that sort of positive patterns over time. And we see it in our classrooms at all levels of life. Systems self-organize. Montessori understood that scientifically all the way back in her time before any of this was applied to leadership. She created self-organizing environments for children. Just think of that. They connect, reflect, regenerate connection in co-evolving ways. Now, this is what they're saying it applies to leadership. It goes all the way back to the work that Montessori designed for the child. So science tells us self-organizing systems can flow near the edge of chaos. And so that's that teacher in the environment, the guide in the environment, is in this self-organizing system. And yes, it's right on the edge sometimes. That's the work that they are doing. So here's a question. In our Montessori organic model, what is considered to be well-being? Well, the answer is well-being is when a healthy system or a healthy community is integrated. And what does integrated mean? It means it's highly differentiated. Each human being is themselves, and yet it's well-linked. Differentiated and well-linked. And Dr. Dan Siegel, who is a pediatric neuropsychologist, defines well-being this way. It's a great diagnosis of a classroom environment or the whole school, etc. He did the acronym FACES. So when we're noticing our school, noticing a classroom, etc., we look for, is it flexible? Is it adaptive? Is it coherent? Is it energized? Is it stable? That's the acronym for FACES. And on a daily basis, we can see where it's completely whole that way or where there's parts that are off. And so that gives us clues in terms of where we move in to help guide it. So what does it look like when it's not well? Well, this is the answer. People stop being differentiated. They'll herd together. They won't be standing on their own 2 feet. People stop being linked or interconnected, or both. So that's a wonderful clue again about what we're seeing in our school, whether it's in well-being or not. So how does an impaired community or individual show signs of trouble? Well, it could be rigid or chaotic or both. And there's times when things happen in a school like that. But a community is always in a process of becoming flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable. It isn't rigid and fixed. It is in this process. So we're always noticing that type of characteristics. Okay, now we're going to move to change. Big breath. Everybody take a breath. It's known today, all the way back actually to the beginning of technology in the 1990s, that the rate of change has increased dramatically. So going back into the 80s, it was at a certain pace. Into the 90s, with the introduction of technology, the rate of change has gone faster. It's important to understand that. And what happens when the rate of change increases? Well, the human being becomes more anxious. Anxiety goes up. Haven't we seen this with the pandemic and so many other things? So here's the parents sending their child off to school for the first day, and they're saying, whatever you do, don't let him sense our anxiety. Well, this anxiety is part of human nature. It's not pathology, it's in our human nature, and it's pervasive in society today. So we have to look at how to approach this by reinventing leadership, the integrity and the authenticity of ourselves while staying connected to others. These are the keys to the kingdom. Being who we are authentically with integrity and staying connected to the others. That reduces the anxiety. So the power of a leader resides in their presence, in the nature of their being. Leadership is not about managing it is about managing oneself, not managing others. This is the power that we possess as a leader, is being present and being connected, not having to micromanage. So this is my favorite metaphor. It's a beautiful Calder mobile. If you were in my room that I'm in right now, you'd see a mobile hanging from my ceiling. It's a reminder that in this practice, in this work, we notice the patterns, we watch for well-being, we're taking all of this in, and we say to ourselves, which of these parts of the mobile do I touch so that it all starts to move? So each of these parts may be a part of the school, and we determine where it is we go in. And we know that when we touch a part of the mobile, the whole thing starts to move. So that's a metaphor for training ourselves in a way to be when we see challenges. Now, if you're an elementary trained Montessorian, you'll like this. This is the timeline of life. And we're going to look at it. I had a friend of mine create these little artistic pieces. First life formed on Earth with prokaryotes. Our children learn this in elementary school. Prokaryotes were self-reproducing. They had no consciousness and no ability to join other life forms. And along came the eukaryotes, which led to our own species. This is the biology within us. We join for reproduction. We tackle new duties. We're conscious of ourselves and others. And we can also merge in fusion and lose ourselves. That's a challenge. So the tension between wanting to be an individual and wanting to join together is a natural part of our species as a living thing. It's in our biology. It's not in our psychology so much. It's in our biology. This is where we have evolved to. It's in our biology to want to be distinct and differentiated. Yes. And it's in our biology to want to belong and work together, to come together. That's the tension. So the relationship problem is preserving ourselves in close relationships. And that's why all that guidance and work that we do as a leader is so important. It resolves that tension. So this was in the New York Times quite a while ago. It was a cartoon. Two little fish over there on the left are looking at each of this whole pool of fish, and they say, I believe that's a Montessori school. And I actually blew up this cartoon one time on my copier, and every single fish is uniquely distinct and differentiated. So the cartoonist was amazing. And I took the liberty of changing it to some extent. I took the liberty of creating the interconnectedness that exists among each of the fish or all of we humans, so that we're depicting that Montessori school. If you can think of it as an emotional field, that emotional field runs through the whole community. And that's the main reason why this work of leadership is so important. If we, as the adults in the school, are building a healthy emotional field among us, the children will feel it. They will experience it. They won't know all the details of our relationships, but they will feel us, because that's that interconnected piece. There's a scientific study that was done at a farm where there was a herd of cows, and along the fence, it was an electric fence. And when the cow went up to the electric fence and got zapped, within 1.2 seconds, the whole herd became anxious. Well, we're looking at mammals here, and we are mammals. And so part of that leadership work is really knowing how we are to be present in that school so that the anxiety lowers, because we know it's there. So we learned that getting relief from anxiety has to do with these things. Which, as humans, it's just totally human nature to want to get relief from being anxious. And so one of the most common ways that we do is we triangle. So it's human nature to not go to the person we have the difficulty with. We go and complain to our friend. That's a triangle. So triangles exist in every community, and to keep the anxiety down, we learn the practice on our staff of not triangling. We learn the practice of learning to go to one another and really talk it out, even if we have to practice with someone else ahead of time. But that is one of the biggest ways that we try to get relief. Another way is we distance or we cut off. We have Thanksgiving dinner and Uncle Joe is cut off from coming to our dinner anymore, or that kind of behavior. We don't have conflict so much in our school in an overt way, but there's conflict that gets relief. Over-under functioning, where one person does more and then the next other person does less. Projecting. We, as leaders, we get projected upon a lot, and that relieves someone's anxiety, maybe a parent. And we also get relief by herding together. I can remember coming out of my school in the morning and seeing a group of parents in the parking lot. They're busy complaining, and they're herding together. That's getting that relief. So here is just a silly picture from the old days. You're probably too young to remember him, but he's a well-differentiated leader. And that's what we're trying to become, is well-differentiated and connected, both. So here's the real well-differentiated leader. She is the ultimate role model of everything that we've talked about in this particular presentation. So just to see some signs of chronic anxiety in society, these are some of the examples. Micromanaging, hypervigilant. We've gone through a whole period like that with our parents. Boards tend to be data-driven, relying on experts rather than our wisdom, our common sense. Fear-based decisions, and often resistance if we as the school leader take a stand. Those are signs of that anxiety, which is human nature. It's in our biology. There's our beautiful mobile again. Where do we go in? So here's some questions for you that you can take with you. Who are you? What do you stand for? This is work on ourselves. When you experience life at its best, what do you notice about how you're feeling? What are you doing? What talents or abilities do you possess that when applying them, you feel a sense of rightness or wholeness, well-being? So there's 3 C's to this being authentic that we've been focusing on. Being connected, having clarity, we have to really reflect to be clear, and being calm. So in the language of leadership, we call calm being a non-anxious presence. That's language that we use in our course. So these 3 C's operate together. They impact that emotional field that we just talked about. They balance reactivity and they build trust. And what we know is from living science. We know that there's a deep urge in life to thrive in all living things. Thriving is realized through self-organizing, the Montessori environment, and thriving is its purpose. The inner urge to thrive is fundamental to Montessori. So communities of people thrive when belonging and autonomy are honored. This is that unity that you're seeking and the differentiation of each individual person as autonomous. And those 2 things are honored. This ties completely to our DEI work. Autonomy as a unique person, a sense of belonging to the community. When both of these are included, it results in peace. That hum in the Montessori environment, that comes from those 2 things. The new sciences transform leadership just as Montessori transformed education. So leadership came from the factory model too. It was a factory model, and we're trying very hard to get away from that. We need each other's help to make visible what is and what needs to emerge, to evolve and change. I'm just summing it up now. And ending with this quote, here is an essential principle of education. To teach details is to bring confusion. To establish the relationship between things is to bring knowledge. From childhood to adolescence, Maria Montessori. So I will stop. Thank you for being so patient through all of that. I hope it tweaks some thoughts and encourage you to explore more.
A lot to take away. I like all of these. It's very fitting that you presented this topic this week, because next week we're talking about parent anxiety, and you mentioned a lot. And I think, it seems to be a big part of leadership nowadays. I would love to hear kind of just maybe what would be your advice to leaders out there who are dealing with highly anxious parents.
Yes, they certainly are. And they honestly have every right to be when you think of all that we've been through. It's totally understandable. This work that I'm talking about in terms of anxiety comes from what's called family systems theory. And it was a great psychiatrist in the 50s who, his name was Murray Bowen. And he was given a big grant to study mental illness at NIH. You've all heard of NIH now, right? And he discovered that if he worked with the whole family as a unity, rather than try to go fix the patient, that when the family really started to get good at talking about what their issues were, taking a stand where they were, differentiating themselves, that miraculously the patient got better. And that's when he discovered the emotional field. So in terms of that anxiety, it's not being pathological. It's really in our biology to react to such horrible change as we've all been through. And so giving people a chance to heal through talking and conversation and active listening, where our role as a leader is to, what I hear you saying is this. Is there more? That active listening process is so healing to people, and that will help to lower that anxiety. And with some people, they have to come back the next day and all filled up with anxiety again. but those are the ones that we really spend more time with, just helping with that process. So being calm, being non-anxious ourselves, we're all mammals. We have this emotional field. We can actually lower the anxiety by our own calm. I hope that's a help.
Yeah, that's great advice. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Kathy? We've got a few minutes before we wrap up. I just want to pause and see if anyone has anything to say.
I just want to, whoops. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
You are amazing. Your vision and your, like I have worked with many administrators over time, and the work that you're doing is like so helpful. I recommend you all the time.
Thank you.
Just because your vision and your balance. That's the thing I appreciate the most.
I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to learn these things. And I just felt like as I was learning them, that was our blind spot in leading our schools. Yeah. And so the opportunity to share these kinds of things is so helpful. You can do a list of 12 skills of being a leader, but it doesn't go to this. This is the heart of what makes a difference. Yeah.
And I congratulate you on this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anything you were puzzled by? It was a lot to look at, but that just, gives you a little introduction.
I just want to say as well, I in the chat, I dropped the link to Kathy's organization where you can find out more information about leadership resources and the course as well. So if any of you are interested in the more extensive course or like the regional courses that Kathy will be doing as well.
Yeah. If you go to the website and just click on our programs, that's where you can look at the modules that are coming up of the course. And register if you wish. We have a wonderful scholarship program as well. That was the beauty of becoming a nonprofit, is that we can really help people get through the course successfully, even if there's a financial challenge. I'll share a story, which is one of those first cohorts that was online during the pandemic. We were joined by Ishwar Pokaharel, who runs a school of 600 children in Kathmandu, Nepal. And he was not Montessori trained. He did not run a Montessori school. He ran a government school for children in poverty. And he was surrounded by all of us Montessorians. And about 3 months into the course, he contacted me and said, I'm convinced I need to transform this school to a Montessori school. Will you help me get trained? And so we launched a scholarship drive, and he is now at one of the training centers in Arizona, and he's getting his 3 to 6 training. And then he's going to finish elementary, and then he's going back to his 600 children. The government hired a substitute for him. And when he gets back, he's going to transform that school into a Montessori school.
Wow.
I just feel like, that's why we're alive, to to really make a difference like that. I'm so excited about that.
That's incredible. Wow.
It makes me so happy.
Definitely feel inspired after your session, Kathy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I mean, I'll pause one more time. I guess you can also reach out to Kathy via her website. She's got information there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for your time and your wisdom. You're doing incredible work, and it's impacting many, many, many people.
Thank you.
Next week, like I said, we're going to be joined by Melita Gardner. She is a current administrator and school manager at her school, and she is going to be talking about working with anxious parents and also setting healthy boundaries so that you can communicate effectively but protect your own sanity. You have to serve so many families and also staff as a leader, so you need to be able to help those anxious parents feel comfortable, but also you yourself to feel comfortable. So if that's a topic you're interested, please join us next week. It'll be at the same time, and it's always free to join these calls. So we look forward to seeing you. Thanks again, Kathy, and thank you everyone for joining.
Kathy, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thursday, everyone.